Welcome to Plan V TV, the show about Vermont independence. I'm Rob Williams, the publisher of VermontIndependent.net, where every citizen is an entrepreneur and every entrepreneur a citizen. With us today in the MRV TV studio is Anne Vlahos, business strategist and author of a new book, To Die For, I want to get the title right, To Die For, The Gifts of Being Present Through Loss and Grief. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So glad you're here. This is kind of a heavy topic.
No doubt, no doubt.
But I'm so glad that we ran into each other the other day because I think it's a topic that affects us all. It's universal. And I wanted just to, before I turn things over to you, read just a short passage from our Most Likely to Succeed book, a short essay by Thomas Naylor, who is now no longer with us, from 10 years ago now, about the title of this is called The National Healthcare Debate, Greed, Fear of Death, and a Vermont Alternative. And he writes, it's a beautiful piece, but he says at the beginning, the fundamental problem underlying the United States healthcare system is neither an economic nor a political problem, but rather a philosophical one. In short, the U.S. healthcare system rests perilously on two principles, fear of death and greed. The demand for healthcare services in the U.S. is driven by our inordinate fear of death. We neither know when to die nor how to die, and few physicians are very helpful to us in dealing with these questions. The supply of healthcare services, on the other hand, is driven by the greed of providers, hospitals, pharmaceuticals companies, and health insurance companies. When human greed exploits the fear of death, there is no limit as to how high healthcare prices can rise. For those who are fortunate enough to have good health insurance, the message is, you deserve the best medical care money can buy because you are entitled to live forever. I was just struck by that passage in reading your book, and I'm not finished with it. You just sent it over to me. It's still sort of in production.
Sure. Yep.
Right.
Not coming up.
So welcome to the show.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
What a great introduction, though.
Oh, well, I should say, too, on a personal note, I lost my father to cancer in 2006, and I miss him every day. And I was reflecting on my own experiences, kind of helping him die with dignity. I kind of wished I'd had your book at the time, reading it. So let's do this because I want to get out of the way here. You've written this book, To Die For, The Gifts of Being Present Through Loss and Grief. And give us the website before we go any further, where people can find out more information.
Sure. So the website is todieforbook.com.
That's so easy.
Yeah.
Todieforbook.com. Okay.
Yeah.
And you put together this book in 5 chapters. And what I thought we'd do in the time we have is just maybe you can address the content of the book chapter by chapter and begin with the introduction. Well, why did you write this book?
So I lost my mom in 2007, my dad in 2014. My mom it was very unexpected. She had a burning accident while she was cooking lunch, and then it was a very long and short 5 weeks to deal with a process. Young kids, they're in New Jersey, I'm here. My father and my sister really kind of pushed me to the front there to make some decisions, to really take point. And through that process, I was caught up in emotion at times and caught with blank spaces of time to reflect. And so as I got through the whole thing, if you can say that, right? I got to the end and said, well, I've learned so much. And when friends were asking me, how are you doing? I would come forward with things that were causing them to think. So that was the first trigger. The second trigger was when my father passed away. At the end of his life, he also passed away from cancer. The last 2 weeks he was in hospice. And probably after less than a week in hospice, they were like, you tell us what you want. You've gone past embracing this process, and now you're leading us. So there was also a reverend that I was very close with. We developed a really open and honest relationship. And after my father died, there were some pretty unique experiences that I had with reconnecting with him. And I started to talk to her about it, and she said, I sure hope you're journaling, because this is something that people need to hear. And it took a lot of courage. Mostly because, I'm a business person. I'm an emotional business person. I'm a passionate business person, but I'm a business person. So being able to lay out not only my emotions, but also the experiences of my parents and some things that are deeply personal was a challenge and a risk. But I also realized that I could help more than what the cost was to me to take that risk. So I took the plunge and wrote.
Wow. Yeah, I'm almost through it. It's a very powerful book. Let's start with chapter 1, and I'm just going to read the first subsection title of that. Chapter 1, you write about the news, the shock of finding out. Yeah. There's no way of controlling when and how the message comes to you. Talk a bit about the news.
So the news is always the first thing, right? You know, and the news, I say it that way and I capitalize it because you may even have a hint that something's wrong, but until someone says you're diagnosed with stage 3 this, or you now have a terminal kidney, or, you know, the person was so injured in an accident that. So until that actually gets vocalized, it's not really real. But when the news hits you, it's then exactly real. So responding to that is really your first call of action when you're dealing with the passing of a loved one. And so with the idea of the news, you know, it can be something that's sudden and instantaneous. It can be something that you're drawn to. But what I kind of understood was that you really have to be present with it, because right away you want to jump away from it. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. You're freaking out. You're upset. You want to cry. But why does that happen? Right? And so this is part of the how do you keep your center.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, and it is the news, right, in here.
I mean, do you remember that moment yourself?
You know, with my dad's cancer, I'm just going to be real personal about this. You know, he fought it for close to 3 years. And I do remember that moment when we realized that he wasn't going to make it. But it's interesting that you call it the news, because I imagine, and I think you write a bit about this too, there a lot of instances where you're not sure for a while, right? Is this terminal? Is it not? What's going to happen?
Right.
So there's this kind of, it's like an evolution of news, if you will. So chapter 2 is called so the news comes. Chapter 2 is called Keeping Your Center. Emotions can and will knock you off balance.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So probably first one was, you know, with my mom. When I just called her for a recipe and found out that she had this accident and that she was in a hospital.
Wow.
And immediately, 10 minutes, jumped in the car, told my husband I was leaving. I didn't know when I was coming back. And it's 5.5-hour ride. So that's a long time to think. And how do you pass that 5.5 hours, right? So how do you keep your center? How do you not drive off the road? It's night. You know, it's all of those things. And then one thing that was really amazing to me was I called the burn unit and I talked to a nurse who was taking care of her, and she said, just pull over and stop for a second. She's in the best of care. Nothing's happening right now. It's the middle of the night. Get yourself there. Get yourself rest. Make sure you eat. Make sure your father eats. And then come in. And so, you know, this keeping of center, there's times where, you know, even with surgeries or processes or procedures, you know, you're worried, you're anxious, and so what does that come from? That really comes from going back in time and wishing this didn't happen, and it going forward and saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to be so devastated when they're gone, right? And so really the idea of keeping centered and present is holding with your exact emotions, but not going back and going forward. It's about the being present. We hear about this all the time, you know, conscious dialogues, all this. It's about being present, right? And so this whole thing is about that. And so in the book, I give a couple of techniques to help pull you into that space when things really go off balance.
Can you give us one?
Yeah. So, you know, your breath and your heartbeat are the two most critical things. And something that I found through both, it was spontaneous, and then I began observing it, right? So one was, and I'm really into meditation. I meditate every morning, and so there's that, you know, that's whole connection with yourself. And so it always starts off with identifying with the breath. And so what I'd find myself doing, even when you have emotions, especially when it hurts your heart, you're gonna cover your heart. So the idea that I like to offer is cover your heart and close your eyes, and then just connect with your breath.
Nice.
3 seconds in, 4 seconds in, 5 seconds in. Sometimes the hardest thing to do when you're in panic mode or deeply in emotion is to take a deep breath And so you work yourself into it. And then you give gratitude for the smallest little thing that you can find, because that also brings you back into where's the gifts. And it could be somebody who, a cafeteria worker bringing a lunch for your loved one and they offer you a juice. I mean, that's something actually to connect with and be grateful for. Connect when people are trying to connect with you. Allow that to happen.
Yeah, as the Buddhists like to say, practice sort of a be here now kind of approach. And that seems really important. I remember when I got the news about my dad, we like to be in control, right? And a big part of my experience with my dad's dying for me was just recognizing, whether I liked it or not, that there's nothing you can do. This is going to happen. I mean, there's a lot you can do, but you're not going to control this.
Right.
And that was sort of eye-opening for me. And it wasn't just sort of an aha; it kind of went on. And I would argue, I still live with that, and it was instructive. It's a larger life lesson,
It is. Same thing happened for me, but it was my sister that helped me see that. My dad was kind of hard of hearing, and I was worried that maybe my mom wouldn't, I expressed to her that maybe my mom wouldn't have gotten such a bad burn if he had actually heard her earlier. And she just quickly turned to me and said, this is an accident and this is no one's fault.
Well, yeah, and it's important to remind
So just remember, just be present and just focus. This is nobody's fault. Mom's hurt. Our goal is to try to get her better. Our goal is to give her the best care possible. And so that was extremely helpful, and that was probably then how I looked at every moment that I wanted to kind of fix it, right? Because like you say, you want to be in control. My thing was I wanted to fix everything. How can I maximize things? I mean, I've been in sales, I've been in marketing.
Right.
The first thing you want to do is, and so, you take that principle and you apply it to your life. It doesn't work so much. It doesn't work all the time, right?
We have to check
that's for a successful person, that's a little difficult to take.
Right.
But what success is it's defined quite differently, right? Success is successfully dealing with this and being present with your emotions and being present for the emotions and, situation of the person who's passing away.
Let's give a shout out to the book title again on the website. So the book is called To Die For, I want to get that subtitle right, To Die For, The Gifts of Being Present Through Loss and Grief. And the website again?
ToDieForBook.com.
Love that, ToDieForBook.com. So chapter 3, The Incredible Honor in the Process. And then I want to read the next. Understanding Someone's Wishes and changing the process of death from a fearful or taboo-ridden experience to a celebration. Can you talk about that, chapter 3 a bit?
Yeah, I come from, big Catholic families on my mom's and dad's side. And so, death was something I was never kind of shied away from. I think I was at my first open casket wake when I was like 2 or something, I'm told. So I'm told, right? I mean, God knows what I was thinking when I was 2, right? So with that, it was something that I was exposed to, but was everyone being totally forthcoming about their emotions? Well, pretty much. I mean, I think we had a fairly open family, but there's still that fear of death, right? But then when you go and say, well, what are we going to do to honor a person? This ceremony is really about honoring who they, how they live their life. One of the best things that someone passed on to me was right after my mom died, the nurse who took care of her passed me the poem The Dash. Have you ever read that?
I have.
Right, and so, right.
Yeah.
And so I loved it so much. I typed it up in a beautiful fashion and had it at her funeral because I felt it really is about that. It's not like, 1923 to 2007. It was literally the time in between and who she was and what she stood for in her life. And so some of the ideas that we used to celebrate that was, I had written beautiful notes to her, instead of gifts for Mother's Day about why I love my mom. And so I had them out so that people could read them. I gave them to the priest so he could speak about her in the eulogy. Her love was gardening and flowers, food and flowers, right? And so I put together little boxes of herbs and flowers and gave them to all the nurses at the unit because they went above and beyond the care that I expected. We got perennials and gave them away to everybody who came to the dinner afterwards so that they could do something and put it in their garden, and when it comes up the next spring, remember my mom. And so it was about, understanding that a person, their physicality is what you miss. The love that you have for them is always there, and you can always honor it. And so that even comes to, I did a recent blog on the website that talks about what do you do on the anniversary? and I choose to do things that celebrates what they do. So, April, I'm weeding the garden, and July, I'm out there hiking in the woods, and this is what I'll do. Yeah. But that's the idea of honoring their memory. And it's not just at that moment, but then it's honoring their life through your life, because it's that love never leaves.
Yeah. The anniversary of my dad's birthday, March 29th, he was born in 1938. It's always a nice time for our family because we're pretty close and we talk quite a bit, but it's always kind of a special kind of day of reconnection.
Yeah. And
remembering, I have two brothers, they'll often float, or I'll do this too, float old photos of him and kind of into text messages, and it's neat just to kind of remember and honor his memory.
Something really unique happened that's probably one of the beautiful memories for me. I always feel like when those things happen that it's a time to heal the circle of the family, right? Mm-hmm. If you think of a family all holding hands and one drops out, then you reach and grab the next hand. Mm-hmm. And I feel that it's very much like that, rejoining. Mm-hmm. But at my dad's wake, when it was just the family, I don't know if you had a chance to look, but there's a picture on the last page of the book. Mm-hmm. Two of my mom's sisters came. They were 94 and 100 at the time. And I was talking about reconnecting with their sister, who was 96, when I was in Ohio on a business trip. And I said, oh, yeah, it was so much fun trying to make her take a selfie. And they're like, what's a selfie? So here I am at a funeral parlor looking, where's my phone? Yeah. Where's my phone? And, I grabbed my phone, and, the first few pictures were like them looking like this and the laughs. It was hilarious. But what was the cooler part was that everybody realized what I was doing, and they piled up behind me. Wow. And we have this selfie with all these families, and I feel, when I look at that picture, even now, I get emotions because it's like they got my back. Yeah. We're all together, and I can't help but think that my dad would think that was the coolest thing that could have possibly happened at a wake. I mean, maybe an Irish whiskey toast as well. My maiden name is O'Boyle, but, it's okay.
I like it. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, Chapter 4,
sure.
You write about personalizing the medical process. That reminded me again of this. Helping the caregivers understand their patients. And you write about choices as well. Can you talk a bit about Chapter 4?
Yeah. So, again, I'm going to probably draw on my experiences a bit to help explain. So, with my mom, she had to have numerous surgeries, and during that process, she had to be intubated. And so she couldn't speak. So, there's that, right? There's also going back and reflecting, when was the last time you heard their voice and they were able to speak to you? And so I know that we don't always have control over it, but by being present, you can remember it and you will be conscious of it. So that centering technique of coming back to your breath and coming back to your heartbeat, do it as much as you can, because you don't want to go back and regret, right? Maybe you do, maybe you learn from it, but if you can be present with it, it's much easier to deal with your emotions moving forward. So they started calling her Maggie when they were taking care of her, right? And my mother's name was Magdalene. And she didn't really like Maggie. She liked Madge. But her last name was O'Boyle because she married my father, who's an Irishman. She was actually Slovak, right? So, Slovak. So I wrote about a 1.5-page thing about who is Magdalene Martha Piddle O'Boyle. And in decent-sized font. And I didn't do anything other than tape it up to the wall where they were recording her, her vitals. And slowly, not the same nurse, but pretty much every nurse in the unit came in and was just obviously glancing at it while they were pretending to do what they were doing. And from that moment forward, they always called her Madge. Wow. And they didn't call her their Irish Rose anymore. Wow. And so there was that. There was also choosing to not have a TV on in the room and playing something else that may be stressful. It was choosing music and what kinds of music.
That seems critical.
You think, right?
Yeah.
But, again, not every, I'm going by rooms and I'm seeing people watching CNN and Fox, and I'm like, holy gosh, what kind of energy are you bringing in there? This is about healing and so we, chose to use different music in the morning, different music in the evening, that kind of stuff to almost help, because with medications, times of day are kind of difficult. With my dad, he was hard of hearing, and so delivering news to him was quite difficult. Painful words dealt at a high volume are even more, more difficult for a tender heart. And so there's places where you can sort of make interventions, make sure that it's private, make sure that things are, maybe, a microphone. So I think that there was a bunch of different processes along the way where we jumped in and did that. Also, too, the final decisions of where you're going to go for hospice care. There's a brief discussion about what your choices are. It's not kind of as broad as you think, but once you choose one of those 3 or 4 lanes, then there's a lot of personalization to be had. Right. So in the room, you can't have candles. Can you do electronic candles? What can you do to make that process different and honor? And so it goes quite into detail about the choices that we feel can be made.
Nice. I'm really struck by the subtitles in each of these chapters. And then your last chapter, chapter 5, there are many gifts in a loved one's passing. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but talk a bit about that.
So they can be very practical, but they can also be really spiritual. So with both of my parents passing, when people come and there's people that maybe that you don't know, that your parents knew for a long time, and they just tell you stories and you learn things about your parents you never knew. And that's really cool.
It's really cool.
I didn't know my dad was a wonder boy until his brother told me after he died.
Right.
And then I'm like, what is a wonder boy? Thank God for Google, right? So, and so that was put there. I think I learned a lot by going through their stuff. My dad never went through my mom's stuff after she passed away, so it was the double challenge. Maybe that's the way to put it. I'm not quite sure. Right. Of going through, a home of 50 years with both of their things, revisiting them there, seeing who wrote them letters, which letters they kept. Did they make notes in their Bibles? Did they, what was in her purse? Different things like that. So there's so many little things that you learn. But then there's also the spiritual side of it too. And I felt that my connection with my parents didn't end after they passed away. I mean, one thing, music is a big connection. I picked a Cat Stevens song for
Remember?
Morning Has Broken. Morning Has Broken.
Yeah.
There was something about that with garden and life that really resonated. And of course, all my relatives are like, "What did you choose that one for?" But it resonated with me.
I think it's an old hymn that he actually covered.
Really?
But he's so closely associated with that song because he put it on the map.
Oh my gosh.
And he's got such a beautiful voice.
And then here it was done with this amazing organ, in a church, and it just sounded surreal. It was fantastic. Wow. And so this is 2007. How many times do you think you're going to hear Morning Has Broken?
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, and I drove all the time. I was in marketing and sales and in the car. And I mean, I felt like I was hearing this song constantly.
Right, wow.
And then different things remind me of her, when I see a dove, and I had designed my parents' headstone. My father insisted that it was a joint headstone. And so I worked with a memorial place in order to do that, and I chose a 4-leaf clover because my dad was one of those guys that Irish dude looks down at a patch of clovers. Here you go, here you go, and it's like I can do that maybe once in a million years, maybe once in 5 years, but so I had that on there. I had the dove and a rose for my mom, and it just crazy how often those images that remind me of them pop up, and whether it's mystical or not. It's beautiful for me because it's a heart connection, and that's really what matters.
A heart connection, I like that. What was the hardest part about, and again, the book titled To Die For, The Gifts of Being Present Through Loss and Grief, the website, todieforbook.com. What was the hardest part about writing this book for you? What do you say?
Realizing that my emotions were still there, that I still had grief to process. I thought through the loss, through the dealing with their estate, through dealing with, burial and all of that, and the anniversaries, right? Then the first Thanksgiving comes, the first Christmas comes, your birthday comes, you don't get a birthday card, right? Oh, geez, hits the heart. You think you're done. And then going through this, I realized that there was so much more that I still had to process. And, it was interesting during my last rewrite. I had taken weeks off between 2 jobs to finish it, and it happened to be the week in October of 2016 where we had that huge tragedy here in the Valley, followed up by another huge accident the week after.
I was thinking about that.
And it pulled it really real again in front of my face, and also listening and watching kids normalize to the process of memorializing someone, and then beginning to talk about what they liked and they didn't like, and what they might want for themselves, and realizing the value again in that taking advantage of those opportunities to really discuss those things and allow those emotions to come up. You know, I felt very honored to be there, but then going back in my book, it kind of really brought those things back again for me. So I think it was the replaying of the motions again and again. The second part is, you know, there's some pretty amazing stuff in this book as well. You know, I'm a really spiritual person. I believe in, you know, life is not just what you see, that there's more than the five senses. And the book starts off with a pretty amazing story. Although I say I got the news when I called my dad's house to talk to my mom, I had actually gotten that news 3 weeks earlier.
You had known. Yeah.
Yeah, and so those things, I'm an ordinary person having extraordinary experiences. But I think every ordinary person can have extraordinary experiences, and it's about being in touch with yourself to allow that.
Yeah, we have to open ourselves up to those. And, you know, you can call it the supernatural, you can call it the spiritual, you can call it the mystical, you can call it, you know, it goes by many names, I think. But
or reality in life.
Or reality in life, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thin line between life and death and between, you know, the physical world and the world of the spiritual it's a much thinner line, I think, than people realize.
Yeah.
And it seems like, you know, the process of acknowledging the passing of someone, the death of someone, provides you with that potential opportunity.
Yeah.
I wanted to read this to you because this is the end of this, and get your reaction. The end of this piece on the national healthcare debate. This is Thomas Naylor again, who died several years ago now, but one of the co-founders of the Second Vermont Republic. He says at the end. My favorite hospital is the tiny 19-bed Grace Cottage Hospital located in Townsend, the town of Townsend, Vermont. Thanks to a very generous and supportive community, which includes devoted patients, committed volunteers, an amazingly talented, compassionate, and hardworking staff, and wonderful benefactors, Vermont's smallest hospital will soon celebrate 6 decades of saving lives, caring for the sick, helping those who are dying, and encouraging those who are well to stay that way. It's the Vermont way of living, staying well, and dying. Reactions to that?
Wow.
Right?
You know, and that's really isn't that what really we want, right? Yeah. That's what's been missing, that absolute personal connection. Dealing with reality, but in a really loving way. And that sounds like, you know, to me, there was definitely portions where you realized that there was so many people caring, which makes you feel great, but then you realized they were only spending so few amounts of minutes with your loved one that really did they engage? Did they understand? Where was that? And I think by having that level of more intimate care, I mean, it's like an intimate classroom. It's the same kind of a thing, right? Our life is a classroom. By having that level of intimacy, you really can connect with that. I'd love to learn more about that and join them.
We'll give you, here, you can have this copy.
Oh my God, thank you.
I dog-eared it for you.
Cool.
Well, and to that point too, I think, you know, particularly around dying, I think, you know, size does matter in the sense of, and speed does matter. We have to slow down and, as you said, be present, and we need to build sort of an intimate community of friends and relations who can really not just support the person who may be dying, but everyone else around them.
Right, and you know, it's kind of interesting. In the foreword of my book, Akil Kaplan actually was the person who wrote my foreword. So he's from Three Moon Wellness here in Waitsfield,
he's been
right?
On the show.
And he's an incredible guy, very thoughtful, very introspective, and we've been, you know, I mean, I'd like to think that my healthcare providers are also my friends, which we are. And, you know, he didn't realize I was writing this book until I was working with them on something and mentioned, oh, geez, now they're telling me I have to find a foreword. Oh, how am I going to get somebody to write a foreword? And he's like, what are you writing about? And I didn't realize he had a passion about coaching people for the best life ever as they come to the end of it. And so I'm like the bookend to that, right? I'm talking about how do you deal with it as the family. He's talking about it, how do you deal with it personally. And I feel like there's some really incredible connections that people can kind of come forward with and join together to really help people through this, because my father used to say, birth is a terminal illness. And that sounds really nasty, but it's really pragmatic.
It is.
He said, I've never seen someone get out alive.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, one of my other friends' moms says, oh, I have friends in both places now. It's great. And it's like, when you're a little bit younger, these things are quite affronting
Yeah.
when you hear them. But now, I'm in my 50s. It's all good.
It makes
I'm
sense.
like, it makes sense.
Yeah,
I
it makes
resonate
sense.
with it.
Yeah. Well, Anne Vlahos, thanks for writing this book.
Well, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to talk about it with you. The whole goal of this is 10% of my sales are going towards designated to hospice and also gaining access to hospices. So it's not about me. It's about what I learned and how that it can help others, not just dealing with it, but also through the process of the end of their life. So I really hope that we can really make a difference here.
I hope so too. The book title again, To Die For, The Gifts of Being Present Through Loss and Grief. The website one more time?
todieforbook.com, and it'll be published September 10th.
Fantastic. So it's coming right up.
Yep.
Oh, we got you even before the book.
You
That's
did.
So great.
You did.
Well, good luck with that, and we'll help you get the word out.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Of course. You've been listening to Plan B TV, the show about Vermont independence. I'm Rob Williams, the publisher of VermontIndependent.net. With us in studio today has been Anne Vlahos, business strategist and author of a brand new book called To Die For, todieforbook.com. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, V for Vermont.